Today was a look at a long-standing tradition within Aboriginal communities, and that is this idea or this concept of story.
And today we are at Uplands Park Elementary School, and we're working with groups of students to write Indigenous stories.
Yeah, I like Aboriginal story because it's cool. We get to write stuff and make up stories.
So the idea is they've been learning about Indigenous story work and Aboriginal ways of knowing and perspectives at the university. We're asking them to work with small groups of students now to take their understanding into a practical context.
And they deconstructed this idea of story on a literary level, but also on a cultural level.
How that looks is we've read them a story, talked about the elements that are within the story.
Well, in Aboriginal stories, there are the medicine wheel characters who are usually represented by the animals of the medicine wheel. There's a problem posed, and there's a community solution suggested.
And it's really fun to see where the kids go with it, which animals they choose.
We've created a story about cooperation between two different animals. We've got Ella the eagle and Justin what, guys?
Beaver.
Justin Beaver.
Aboriginal stories tend to use an animal to kind of portray a message. And so that message is kind of woven through the story with a problem. And the characters interact in a way that the message becomes clear towards the end of the story.
The problem is the bear habitat ruined by the road, like a bunch of cars go by the road and stuff, and it's bothering him.
And then we solve it. Either it completely ends, or it's kind of ends in a moral where it's up to them where they want to go with it.
It's really cool because it's not one of those stories that just don't have any meaning. Most of these stories have meanings.
But on another level, they were able to explore the idea of story as it exists in our Indigenous cultures or within our Indigenous cultures here in Canada. So story is, at that level, is such an important part of culture, cultural practice, protocols, and everything that our societies have been built on have been communicated through this idea of story, through this oral history and tradition.
It's such a big piece of social studies, and it's such a big part of our culture, like especially on the island. There's so many different tribes and there's so many different groups, and it's really important that we don't lose that.
Well, elders have a highly respected place in our Aboriginal communities, period, across the board. They've got the wisdom, they've got the long-lived experience, they're our first teachers.
She discussed how the Aboriginal group that she's from, they don't classify the animals according to like species. They classify them, it's two-legged.
It's the four-legged, the flying things, the swimming and crawling things, all come from a place of equity.
And every animal is on the same level. Nobody's higher than each other.
Legends are the way the social fabric of our peoples are created. Legends are our sets of laws and commandments, and they teach people social responsibility.
And weaving those two pieces together, where you've taken sort of the Western worldview and the Indigenous worldview and blending them beautifully in this lesson is something that within our district, within our Aboriginal Education Enhancement Agreement, is something that we promote, something that we role model all the time.
They are very engaged, and children are natural-born storytellers.
Two things that I like about this is I like making up stories and writing about them and things, and I like acting, so it's sort of like acting on paper. You write it all and then you do a bunch of stuff to it.
It's a good time to introduce the building of legends and their purpose. It gives kids another tool to use to deal with social scenarios.
Another piece in our enhancement agreement really is the next step, I believe, in education in the province and the country, and that really is increasing the awareness of all. That's all students, that's all adults in this picture, whether it be in this classroom, in this school, in this district, in this country.
Aboriginal people have a strong sense of community, and one of the expressions you will hear when an Aboriginal person speaks is they will say, all my relations, which is not just referring to their kin or their family, but also it's an acknowledgement that they are in relationship with all things of creation.
Once we can start to put our efforts toward increasing that awareness, we'll have far better success rates for Aboriginal students.
So when I see this coming back, and when I see the importance and the focus, I am humbly grateful, because it is a sign of good things and healing to all Aboriginal peoples here.
And I believe the next step is going to have to step outside of that Aboriginal Education Department, and we're going to have to see a collaborative ownership, if you will. And what you saw today at Uplands Elementary was that piece.